He saved the woman lying in the snow, but when he saw her face, he came face to face with his past, because she was the bride promised to his brother. And from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Eric Weber wasn't the kind of man who liked tracking things, but as he walked along the edge of the mountains, searching for a lost goat, the strange silence in the snow beneath his feet made him uneasy. Silence didn't always mean peace. Sometimes, it meant something was hiding. Eric had learned that over the years. The old hound walking beside him, Lupo, suddenly stopped. His fur was covered in snow, his nose up, ears twitching. He let out a soft whimper. It was a sound Eric wasn't used to hearing. Not the scent of danger but pity or fear. Lupo suddenly stepped off the path, gliding through the snow without leaving a trace. Eric followed, eyes scanning the area. There was no movement between the trees, but the air felt heavy. Something close was breathing. And then he saw it. At the base of the bushes, lying still on the pure white snow, was a figure. A thin wedding dress, dried blood stains, frostbitten fingertips. Long dark hair tangled with snow, no breath visible. But then, Eric noticed her eyelids twitch. He bent down, his hands steady. Her forehead was ice cold, but she was still alive. The dress clung to her body, soaked with snow. She had no shoes. Her hands were bare, and her fingers partly purple. Next to her was a half-burned envelope, edges charred, the name on it almost unreadable. Without thinking, Eric picked her up. Lupo led the way, glancing back now and then. The only sounds were the crunch beneath the snow and Eric's own heartbeat. By the time they reached his cabin, the sky had gone dark. Eric laid her beside the stove, gently removing her soaked clothes and wrapping her in his own blankets. He stoked the fire slowly, careful not to warm her up too quickly. Her chest began to rise and fall slowly. She might survive. Maybe. But what was she doing out there like that? That dress, that envelope? Eric didn't ask. He simply placed the envelope on top of the stove and sat beside her. He didn't sleep at all that night. Her cheeks were hollow, but her face held a soft, forgotten beauty, like a faded photo from the past. Eric didn't ask her name. She was too far gone to remember it herself. By morning, her eyes were still closed, but her fingers were lightly clutching the edge of the blanket. And for the first time in years, Eric felt something. Not responsibility, not curiosity, not even fear. It was the feeling that something was about to change. And outside, the wind had shifted. On the morning of the third day, when the woman opened her eyes, Eric was holding a shotgun strap he had mended with brown wool thread. Her eyes didn't focus on anything at first. She stared at the ceiling, like she was trying to make sense of the light. Then her gaze shifted to Eric. No fear, no surprise. Just a long, silent look. Want some water? Eric's voice was rough, but calm. The woman didn't answer, just turned her head slightly. Eric offered the cup. Her fingers trembled a little as they reached for it, but she held on and drank. A small, steady sip. That was when Eric understood she had chosen to stay alive. Her first words came around noon. "You found me there?" Eric just nodded. "You don't know who I am." "Not yet," Eric said. The woman closed her eyes for a while, then opened them again. "My name is," she started, but didn't finish. The sentence faded out. The next day, she tried to stand up using a chair. When Eric moved closer to help, her eyes quickly shifted to his hands. She was alert. She pulled back. "I'll push the chair," Eric said flatly. "Not carry you." She gave a small nod. 2 days later, she said her name. Elisa was all she said. Eric bowed his head, but didn't repeat it. He could tell from her tone that this name belonged to her past. She'd said it just once, to be done with it, to let go of its weight. When Elisa sat on the rug beside the stove, she stared out the window for a while. "I was promised to someone," she said softly. "He was supposed to wait for me here." Eric's hands paused. He remembered the envelope on the floor burned at the edges, a name barely visible. "Maybe he's still waiting," Eric said. "No," she replied slowly. "He's not. Because he never did." That night, Eric stoked the stove a little more. Snow fell lightly outside, and the room inside wasn't exactly warm. But for the first time, a stranger was breathing in the same space, and Eric didn't want that breath to stop. The next morning, the woman walked to the window. Her knees still trembled, but she could stand. She looked out at Eric's field, at the emptiness, at the silence. "This place is yours," Eric nodded. What's left of it? She smiled softly. Sometimes what's left is what turns out to be most useful. That afternoon, Lupo barked. Eric grabbed his rifle and stepped outside. There was someone in the trees. A horse could be seen from afar, with a mailbag on its saddle, but no rider. The horse had come on its own. There was an envelope attached to it, with Eric's name on it. When he opened it, his eyes narrowed. The note inside was short, but heavy. If the woman's still alive, bring her back to me. And under it, a signature. Lucas. Eric froze. He remembered that name. The man who appeared in letters his younger brother used to write before he suddenly disappeared. He burned the envelope. He said nothing to Elisa. Not yet. But for the first time, something had stirred inside him. Because maybe finding her nearly frozen in the woods hadn't been an accident. Maybe this story was a new page in someone else's ended tale. And on that page, knowing who Elisa used to be mattered less than something else. Why she was still alive. The next morning, while Eric was fixing rotten boards outside the door with his pocket knife, Elisa quietly appeared behind him. She was still weak, but could stand longer now. She wore an old wool jacket Eric had given her. The sleeves were too long, but she held it tightly with both hands, like if she fell, that fabric was the only thing that could save her. There was a letter yesterday, Elisa said. Eric's back tensed for a moment, but he didn't turn around. Did you say who it was from? No. Was it someone connected to me? No. Eric repeated, but this time his voice came from deeper within. Elisa took a step closer. Don't lie to me, Eric, because I know the smell of that envelope. I recognize the shape of the seal. It was from Lucas, wasn't it? Eric slowly closed his pocket knife. He took a deep breath. Yes. Elisa bowed her head like she'd heard exactly what she was expecting. He bought me. That sentence hung in the air on the cabin's porch, slicing through it before falling like snowflakes that never hit the ground. I was a mail-order bride, but the money never came, so I bought the train ticket myself. When I arrived 2 weeks late, no one was there to meet me. I asked for his name. Some said they knew him. Some said he left. One man didn't even look at me, just said, he was never even married here. Eric's fists were clenched. He didn't look at her, but every part of him was listening. I stood there waiting for him. But the longer I waited, the smaller I felt, Eric. I didn't want to be one of those women you look at with pity, so I started walking. I thought I'd reach a house before the snow got bad. Just a house. Some warmth. A plate of food. A door. I'm not giving you back to that letter. Eric's voice was almost a growl. Elisa turned to him. It doesn't matter who bought me, Eric. What matters now is who I belong to. That night, there was a strange silence in the cabin. Eric sat by the stove, and Lupo curled at Elisa's feet, whimpering uneasily. The fire didn't quite warm the corners of the room, but it made the shadows in the center dance. As Eric bent to open the stove's door, he mumbled, "Did you really have no one? No family left behind?" Elisa closed her eyes. An aunt, but I can't explain how she looked at me. Like being alive was a crime. When my mother died, I moved into her house, but every day she made it feel like it was someone else's mistake. Running away, no matter what happened to me, was easier than staying. The next morning, while Eric was chopping wood, he heard it. Hoofbeats. 2, maybe 3 horses. Lupo had already moved into position before Eric even reached for his gun. He quietly stepped to the side of the door. 3 men. Strangers. That familiar arrogance on their faces. The kind of confidence that doesn't belong to unarmed men. One of them said to the others, "They said she's here." Lucas's woman. Eric heard it through the crack in the door. His blood ran cold. They had come for Elisa. Not with law, with force. And in that moment, for the first time, he made a decision as certain as death. He opened the door just slightly, raised the rifle to his shoulder. "You've got the wrong house," was all he said. The man in front, big, with a 3-day beard, stepped forward with a mocking grin. "What kind of brother sends men to take what he didn't want himself?" he laughed. "We're just here to collect what's his. No one here belongs to you." Eric's finger was on the trigger. "Think twice before you leave. These mountains hide the dead real easy." Then, a voice rang out from inside. "Elisa, if they come in, shoot." Eric's vision sharpened. Because now, this fight wasn't just his. It was theirs. And every story has a turning point. This was theirs. Eric's rifle was held steady at the men's eye level. One of them swallowed. Another moved his hand slightly toward his weapon, but when he saw the resolve in Eric's eyes, he backed off. "You're not going to shoot us," said the one in front. "Because you've got no beef with us. We just want the woman. That's it." From inside, Elisa's voice rang out again, this time sharper. "Then come on. But if you do, you'll leave this house on your knees." The men hesitated for a second. Eric shifted slightly, positioning himself with the door behind his back. Lupo had started growling from inside. Eric could tell, instinctively, that he was ready to move. Silence came first, then a gunshot. It wasn't aimed at Eric, but it was meant to be. The bullet sank into the wooden post of the porch. Eric didn't hesitate. He fired. The sound echoed across the snow-covered mountains. The bullet struck one of the men in the shoulder. He cursed as he fell. The other two panicked and turned toward their horses, but one of them was knocked down mid-mount by Lupo's sudden leap. As Eric reloaded, the man scrambled to his feet and jumped onto his horse. "This isn't over," one of them shouted while riding off. Eric didn't respond. When they were gone, all that remained was a trail in the snow and a bloodstain in front of the porch. Eric lowered the rifle. Elisa stepped outside. She wore Eric's old boots and had a tablecloth wrapped around her shoulders like a scarf. Her eyes were still narrowed with fear, but her knees weren't shaking. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "No." "Then," said Elisa, "now it's my turn." She went inside and opened the old metal chest behind the stove. Eric watched in surprise. Inside were a knife, an old hammer, and a few metal scraps. Elisa wrapped them in a cloth. "I didn't run," she said. "I just chose a path. And if that path led me here, then this is where I am now." That night, Eric sat on the porch. The sky was clear. The stars seemed to turn every silence into a kind of language. Before going back in, he pulled out what remained of Lucas's letter from his pocket. Short, commanding lines. "Take the woman. Use force if needed. Whatever's left belongs to me." Eric stared at those words for a long time. Then, with a small knife, he scraped them out letter by letter and tossed the letter into the stove. The next morning, the snow was starting to melt. And that meant more than just a change in the weather. It meant something in the past had shifted too. Elisa was standing at the door. She held Eric's old hunting rifle, but this time, her hands weren't shaking. "If this happens again," she said, "next time I won't wait to pull the trigger." Eric smiled. "Just remember you are not alone." That day, they walked together to the back of the farm. There was an old, collapsed barn there, abandoned for years. Elisa paused, crouched down, and dug into the earth with her hands. She pulled out a small stone, then another. She lined them up side by side. "A life can be rebuilt," she said. "But first, you have to know where you're standing." Eric added another stone beside hers. "I'm standing here," he said, "with you." That day, silence turned into misted breath. And for the first time, everything felt like it belonged. But both Eric and Elisa knew Lucas would return. And next time, he wouldn't come alone. The wind blew differently that morning. Eric stopped fixing the fence and listened to its direction. Even Lupo stood still, ears perked, not making a sound. Silence was nature's strange way of sounding an alarm. Then came the sound of hooves on the road. Slow, steady, but not alone. Lucas rode the first horse. His face, far from the brotherly warmth Eric once remembered, was now covered in the skin of wealth and arrogance. Two other men followed behind him. This time, they clearly hadn't come to talk but to take. Eric waited on the porch. He didn't hold his rifle, but he leaned it where it could be seen. "Eric," Lucas said with a smile. "Good to see you. Wasn't hard finding your place. You haven't hidden it much." "I'm not hiding anything," Eric replied. "But clearly, you haven't forgotten what you came for." Lucas dismounted, looking around. "Where's my bride?" Eric answered without blinking. "There's no bride here. Just a woman. One trying to survive." Lucas laughed. "She used my name to survive. Came because of my promise. Now she's under your roof." At that moment, the door opened. Elisa stepped out. She wore Eric's mother's old shawl, and around her neck, the faded blue scarf Eric had knitted. But the real change was in her eyes. She didn't look like someone who ran anymore. She looked like someone who stayed. Lucas stepped closer. "Elisa, you remember me, don't you?" "I haven't forgotten," said Elisa. "But I've learned not to believe you. We were going to build a life together. You weren't even worthy of carrying my name." Lucas' eyes darkened. One of the men behind him reached for his weapon, but Eric stepped forward. "I've got an offer for you, Lucas," he said. "You're in no position to offer anything. Then you're not in any position to stay. Because if you're breathing on this land, you need that woman's permission first." Elisa stepped forward quietly. She placed her hand on Eric's shoulder. I don't give that permission, she said. Lucas's face tightened. His lips trembled. You still don't understand me, he said. You don't know what was done to me. You abandoned Elisa, Eric said. And every day she waited for you. You were in another woman's bed. Elisa stepped back. She had nothing left to say, but Lucas lunged forward. And in that moment, Lupo leapt with a bark. A gunshot cracked through the air. Chaos lasted only seconds. As Lupo's teeth sank into Lucas' wrist, Eric raised the rifle to his shoulder. But Elisa moved first. She grabbed a rock from the ground and struck Lucas across the face. He stumbled, then collapsed. The other two men reached for their guns, but Eric's look alone was enough. If you want to leave here on foot, he said, turn around. Now, the men grabbed Lucas by the arms and pulled him up. His face showed more shock than pain, as if he'd been broken by a woman's final word. This isn't over, he said, looking back. We know, said Elisa. But next time it begins, we'll be ready. The men rode away. Eric knelt beside Lupo. The old dog was bleeding, but stood up, lifting his nose high like a victor. Elisa sat down on the ground. She wiped her face with her hands. No tears fell, because those tears had already been spilled onto this land. I won't walk behind anyone ever again, she said. Eric looked at her. And I won't walk ahead of anyone. I'll walk beside you, no matter what. That night, the fire didn't go out. Because the strongest part of a home isn't the nails. It's the promises made inside it. And now, that house held two people who had chosen each other and would never back down, no matter the threat. 2 weeks had passed. Every morning, Eric woke up at the same time and hung a kettle in front of the cabin. Elisa quietly watched Lupo as she gathered eggs. At night, they no longer sat in silence by the stove because silence was no longer loneliness. It was a rested kind of peace. That morning, Eric opened the old chest. Inside, he found his mother's journal, a pair of handmade gloves, and a small wooden box. He opened it. Inside was a simple but sturdy ring. One word was engraved underneath: remains. That afternoon, Eric sat Elisa down on the porch boards and took a seat beside her. I've got an offer, he said. Your offers always come a bit late, Elisa replied with a smile. Eric handed her the box. This time I'm asking you to stay first, not to leave. Elisa didn't look at the box. She looked into Eric's eyes, and in them, there was no pride, no need, just presence. I chose you, she said, even before you found me. Did they marry? Yes, but there was no ceremony. Of all the townsfolk, only Mabel came, with a piece of lace and an old prayer book. The wedding began at midday. Eric placed his mother's ring on a wooden table he had built himself. Elisa picked it up with her own hands. I'll take your name, she said, but not to forget who I was, to become something new. Eric flipped to the back of the old family ledger and handed her a pencil. Elisa wrote, Elisa Weber, Spring, 1874. Underneath, Eric wrote, Eric Weber, same spring. Months passed. Summer came. They built a small garden beside the cabin. Elisa planted lavender. Eric wove a fence out of willow branches. People stopped asking who they were. They started asking how they lived. There was never another word from Lucas. But every night, Eric placed a stone at the door's threshold. If he comes, let him trip, he'd say. And Elisa would place a flower beside it. If he comes, let him see who we are. One day, Elisa received a letter. It was from her aunt. If you've built a home there, tell me about it. Because I never built one. Maybe I'll learn from you. Elisa read the letter aloud to Eric. He pulled up a chair. Right back to her, he said, but in your own voice. You don't speak for anyone else now. When winter came, the cabin became something different. Not just a house made of wood, but a world slowly built by two people with their own hands. One night, as the snow fell, Eric stepped toward the window. Elisa, I thought I took you in to save your life. But I'm the one who got saved. Elisa didn't reply. She simply rested her head on Eric's shoulder. And in that moment, no storm was ever really in the past. Because some stories begin right at the edge of the end. And in this story, no one had the right to take a woman back. Because she had already chosen herself. And that choice would forever be the truest home. If this story touched your heart, give the video a like. Tell us how it made you feel in the comments. And subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Every voice matters here.